And then I'm going to start the recording here. Where's the red button? There it is. 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to Streamers and Punches, the podcast from Sound Notion TV that looks at current events and new releases in the world of film music. My name is Bill Witham.
And I'm Kevin Wilt.
And on today's show, we're going to only talk about Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. No, just kidding. But we are going to talk about that with a score by Joe Kramer, look at a couple articles, current events, and pick up a couple things that we didn't have time for in the last episode. So right off the bat, I did see a really interesting article that, and Kevin, I don't know if you ran across this, but it was written by Alex Ross, and he's a quite fine writer of music. This article happened to be in the New Yorker, and I can't remember if that's his normal hangout.
He's the staff music critic at the New Yorker.
Okay,
Classical
thank you.
music.
And I knew that New York was his. That was his digs. I just didn't know which publication. But and he's got a great book called "The Rest Is Noise." Wait, did I mess that? Did I mess the title up? No.
He's got a couple of books. The Rest Is Noise is his big one that he's most famous for.
Okay, and he's got an article where he just briefly describes the action sequence in Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, where it's integrating the Puccini opera Turandot, and which of course has the famous Nessun Dorma aria that a lot of people are familiar with, and even those that don't know opera have probably heard that melody. And I think he sort of captures it in the title with that it's not an embarrassing inclusion of classical music into a big Hollywood blockbuster. And it's like, yeah, it's like finally. So good job to the makers of Mission Impossible. Any more discussion about that one scene, I think, is kind of I don't know, Kevin. You've seen the movie. Is it spoiler territory?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We can get into that in a little bit, I think.
Yeah. We don't have to jump right into the deep end, but it's kind of cool. So he's basically given a shout out to the movie for like intelligently including an entire action sequence set at an opera house while the performance is happening, and then we can talk about a couple more details later whenever we actually talk about that score.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. There was also the Emmy nominations came out, and we didn't really have a chance to cover that in the last episode. But Kevin, there's a couple of several categories. It's not just best music in a TV show anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like actors and actresses. You have best supporting and best guest actor in a miniseries or some convoluted description like that. So what was what are the 5 nominations or 6 nominations rather for Best Outstanding Limited Series? And I just realized that was redundant sounding.
You're putting me on the spot to read these? Okay.
Just the first one.
Okay, so let's see. Most of these names I think I'll be okay with. So the first is Sean Callery's music from 24 Live Another Day. Mac Quayle's music from American Horror Story Freak Show. William Ross, the conductor and orchestrator and also composer. From his music from Away and Back, Rachel Portman's music from Bessie, Kevin Cleash, music from Sophia the First, Curse of Princess Ivy, and Dominic Shearer from The Missing. I think I got most of those pretty close.
I think they're pretty good. Okay, the next category, Outstanding Music for a Series, included Chef's Table by Duncan Thumb, House of Cards by friend of the show, Jeff Beal, of course.
Of course.
Outlander by another friend of the show, Bear McCreary. Penny Dreadful by Abel Kurzeniowski. I know I butchered that, but I tried it. The Paradise by Maurizio Malanini. And finally, Tyrant by Jeff and Michael Dana. And then the last category is Outstanding Main Title Theme Music, which kind of to me it's probably like the main interesting category. So that starts with Marco Polo, the new Netflix show by Danielle Lupi, Texas Rising with themes by Bruce Broughton and John Debney, Penny Dreadful again by Abel Kurzeniowski, and The Dove Keepers by Jeff Beal, Transparent, the Amazon show by Dustin O'Halloran, and again Tyrant by Jeff and Michael Dana. So, do you have any skin in that game, Kevin?
Um, I will say so. Obviously, House of Cards. We've spent time talking about the music from House of Cards before. Chef's Table is this really great documentary series on Netflix. I've watched, I think, maybe half of it. I vaguely remember the intro music. It's I don't remember the music of the series hitting me particularly hard, but just the series in general is pretty great. So that I kind of perked up when I saw that on the list.
Okay.
And the music from Texas Rising, Bruce Broughton and John Debney. I did not see that. I think it was on the History Channel maybe a month or two ago. I did not get a chance to watch it when it came out, but I remember reading and hearing a lot about that music at the time as well.
Do you know anything about Penny Dreadful?
Not really.
Have
I
you
think
seen
it's
the
on
show?
Showtime or something, right?
Okay. Yeah, it's one of the premium channels. Yeah.
That's about all I know.
Okay. And have you seen Outlander or heard it? The music?
I have not.
Because
No.
I know we're completely like terrible journalists, but I mean
Let's not
know
pretend we're journalists.
yeah, I know that's why we're terrible at it.
Oh, okay.
But I was curious if Outlander is like a Scottish Downton Abbey kind of a thing.
I don't
But
know.
I don't. Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, I get that it's very outdoorsy because every piece of promotional marketing for it always shows these two people, a man and a woman, standing on a grassy hill, and that's all I see. And it's windy out there because everything they're wearing is being kind of like blown up in the air somehow. So anyway.
Okay.
All right. So
you say so, Bill.
it's true. Check it. Google it.
I
Google
will.
Outlander promotional materials. All right. So some investigation may be required. Okay.
Or any investigation, maybe.
That too. Yeah. Okay. Well, any other interesting news you've heard lately, Kevin?
Not a ton. I think this tends to be kind of a slow time of year. We've kind of gotten past all the big summer movie stuff mostly, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today a little bit. I know, I think San Diego Symphony and also at the Ravinia Festival outside of Chicago, I believe both of those organizations have been doing or will be doing very soon. I think live screenings of either Star Trek or Star Trek Into Darkness with a live Michael Giacchino score, something along those lines. That's really the only thing I've seen popping up recently, aside from, of course, the Emmy nominations, but that's about it.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we've been listening to.
Sure.
The main one that I mentioned earlier is the Mission Impossible film Rogue Nation, scored by Joe Kramer. And I'd seen his name recently, or the movie's a couple years old, but kind of like that Jim Gaffigan bit. But I just saw Heat, and I want to talk about it now.
Right.
It's like, no, loser. So I just recently on Netflix I watched Jack Reacher, which was, I think, written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who Tom Cruise starred in as the lead and brought in Christopher to, I think, write, produce, and direct Rogue Nation. But also Joe Kramer scored that film, and it wasn't the best score in the world of all time, but it was noticeable because he seemed to take what could have been a very rote, generic action movie. And I think because of Cruise and because of the way they approached certain things in the movie, it wasn't generic. It kind of had a very unique, just a unique personality to it. And I appreciated the film, and the score was noticeable. And the orchestration it used, it just had instruments in it that you could hear clearly, and different sections of the orchestra. It was kind of approached by someone that sounds right away like they know what they're doing. They have a good team that they're working with, and they have kind of like the film itself, that they're using the orchestra, but they're using it well, I guess. And it didn't feel over-synthesized and over-produced. It just felt very, very clear and kind of not like I said, just kind of not overproduced or what a lot of electronics is.
This really struck me even right from the beginning of the film, I feel like this is the first time in a long time I've watched an action movie that has a score with trumpets and woodwinds in it.
Yeah.
Like you can actually a lot of the music in this film actually sounds like it's written for an entire orchestra and
Yeah.
not just strings and percussion and bass trombone.
Mhm.
Which was, I mean, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but in this day and age seems like it's kind of a novel thing. It made the score a lot brighter, a lot richer. Not to mention that just the music itself was really well written. But just that little detail of using the entire orchestra, for me, was like a really welcome thing.
Yeah. And they had put out a couple tracks early of the Joe Kramer score to Mission Impossible. And also, real quick, what I was trying to say a moment ago was that I appreciated his use of the orchestra, and he knew what he was doing in the Jack Reacher score. So when I saw his name attached to this, I thought, well, this will be interesting. And then when I heard a few tracks early that were just put on, I think, SoundCloud, and I listened to them, it was a really cool combination of electronics and orchestra. So in the orchestra was everything: strings, brass, winds, percussion, and electronics, like mostly almost kind of like some loops and some beats, but really, really cool. I mean, just like, okay, this is what we need. We need some fresh, some new blood, some fresh sounds, and some maybe a slightly different way to approach some of these things. And it's kind of interesting that the vehicle to do that would be a 20-year-old movie franchise. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the film itself, I thought the main title was really exciting, and it was fun again. You know, it just the way to engage in that sound of what's a spy movie sound like, and we joked about that with oh crap, what was the movie recently that both of us saw that you said had, and it wasn't Mission Impossible, but it was, or no, maybe it was, no, it was something else. Oh, it's escaping me, but we had talked about there's a spy sound where you have like bongos and you have some like some wood blocks and some flute and maybe some bass, and just you have all these sort of what are normally random elements, and you kind of bring them together, and it evokes a certain sound of what's kind of like sneaking around or kind of I don't know. It's sort of like musical espionage.
Are you sure we weren't talking about Mission Impossible? Because that kind of sounds like what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't remember the conversation you're referring to, so I don't know.
Okay, it may have been. I was thinking it was something before I saw Mission Impossible, but you expect that sound world to be, totally exploited, and I
Right.
think it is. But I think of it like, it was kind of fresh when David Arnold came to the James Bond movies, and there it's going to be much more like big band, and
Right.
and that kind of version of cool. And the Mission Impossible series, the TV series, I guess the multiple series, and the movie series have always had a cool sound, but more they're taking the hint from Lalo Schifrin's original score and theme, which had a couple other elements. It was more like Brazilian or Latin jazz rather than sort of big band jazz, I suppose, than some of the other movie franchises. But it was very cool, and of course, well, what'd you think of the opera scene?
I thought the opera scene was really great, and you had kind of.
Did I overhype it?
You didn't know. I don't think you overhyped it because you told me about it before I went to see the film.
Okay.
I thought it works really, really well, and the fusion of the actual like on-stage opera music with the underscore of the film, it was clever. I think in that article, Alex Ross kind of mentions that you can kind of hear the seams a little bit. It's when you're listening to Puccini and when you're not listening to Puccini.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I liked about it more is you had mentioned, Bill, that like the climactic point of that scene is the high note at the end of Nessun Dorma, and it's where the two leads, like they've met each other early on in the film, but he runs away and he has no idea who she is, so this is his first time running into her again. this is really the first, after that first encounter, the first time in the movie that the two leads have any sort of contact or whatever, and it is during this particular aria. And through the rest of the film, whenever these two characters are kind of having a moment, Joe Kramer brings back the Nessun Dorma tune. Which is, I mean, does that seem like a fairly simple and logical thing to do? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to call it obvious. I think it works really well. I think it was a really good move to do. Because not that I'm really spoiling anything. Well, maybe I am. The movie's been out for like 3 weeks, so I don't care. There's a scene later on in the movie where Tom Cruise and Rebecca Ferguson's characters are having a conversation, and she basically says to him, you know, why don't we forget all this and just run away? And so they have this kind of slightly romantic moment, and that music comes back in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing happens at the end of the movie with their like final goodbye. He brings the tune back then too. So I really like that recall. I thought it was a nice touch. It would have been easy to just leave the opera music within that opera scene and just leave it alone.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. The other thing I liked about it too is he didn't do what Hans Zimmer did in the second Sherlock Holmes movie.
Yeah.
Which was, there's a scene where they go to the opera, and I think it's Mozart's Don Giovanni.
Yeah, Mozart on steroids.
Yeah, except it's Mozart's Don Giovanni, but with Hans Zimmer's orchestra. So it's just huge, over the top, loud, 19 trombones kind of stuff. And they did not do that to Puccini, which was nice.
It's kind of like, I enjoyed the Hans Zimmer approach because it was kind of like, hey guys, what if we just did this? It would be totally crazy and kind of whacked out, but we would understand that it's absurd to begin with. And
a cartoon.
Yeah, it's like a cartoon. And the Robert Downey, Jude Law, Sherlock stuff it's very silly and fun, and that's all it is. And this movie is like a little more dangerous, but it's a little more grounded in reality. There's not people jumping out of, oh no, actually, there's some pretty crazy stunts in this movie, but so I don't know if all of them are grounded in reality, but at least it kind of makes you feel like it is. So I appreciated that. And you're right. I thought I picked up the Nessun Dorma theme in a couple other spots later in the film and felt that that's where one hugely impactful scene is causing kind of like ripples throughout the rest of the movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just like a rock hitting the water, the ripples that go further out are much less significant or less dramatic. So it's not, you don't get a huge presentation of it later, but in that one, hang on, sorry, my office light went off. So in that one scene, it was pretty dramatic, and a favorite part of mine, which Alex Ross points out, is a trick that Hitchcock used, and I should have probably thought that someone else has done that, but I didn't think to look it up, but that Hitchcock has done it, where he zooms in on part of a musical score and shows you that this is the destination moment, something big is going to happen right at this moment. But I love the fact that in a blockbuster Hollywood film that it showed sheet music, and the sheet music was kind of crucial to a moment, and then it referred back to the sheet music when as the moment approached, and I thought it right? Did you feel like it wasn't insulting the way it handled it?
I think a lot of other big budget films would not give their audience enough credit to hang on to something like that. I mean, which to us is, obviously we can read music notation, so to us it's nothing. But even to someone who knows nothing about music, when you see a note head with like circled in red, it's pretty easy to understand. Okay, whenever we get to whatever the hell that weird circle thing is, that's when someone's going to pull the trigger. And to have, not that you're really asking that much of the audience, but to even have that amount of faith that the audience is going to be able to follow that is like, you're never going to see that in like an Avengers movie or something.
Yeah, it was a nice touch. It was just a little bit like, hey, you're following us this far. Let's throw this new thing in here. It's going to involve looking at music, but you know that the music is not only driving towards more action, but building towards a pivotal moment. And it involves the music, and so we're going to visualize it in a whole new way while you're listening to it. And I don't know the context in which you saw it, but I was at an IMAX screen, and it was incredibly loud, and it was awesome. I mean, it was just so fun to listen to some of those big moments in the score. And any other movie would have said, "Oh, this is the one with the one aria in it, so we'll just play that. We'll just smear the scene with that music all over it." And they didn't do that. They did save it a little for the end in the pivotal climax of the action sequence. But leading up to it, they started at the beginning. They started with the actual beginning overture for the entire opera, and then they kind of cut through. And as Alex Ross points out, they kind of picked and choose which little excerpts to play.
Yeah.
But there's moments where they're going backstage, and so they can't have the loudest moments of the opera happening then, because it's sort of a momentary lull in the action while it builds back up. And so they had carefully chosen parts of the opera that the drama kind of dialed it down a little bit. Anyway, I just felt that a music supervisor and a music editor could have done all this, but I want to do some more digging and find out how much, if any, Joe Kramer did, because I think some credit might go to him for how the scene played out, because he's still, he has to work with the film directors, he has to work with the filmmakers to pace how the music and the drama are going to grow and evolve and build up to that moment. And that it was fantastic. I mean, it was just, like I was joking with you, in the Daredevil Netflix show, it has the hallway scene. And this should just now be known as the opera scene.
Right.
So there's that. So if anyone listening has not yet seen Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, it's definitely worth checking out. And that's just a really cool scene. I thought it was funny that Alex Ross says once it gets after the Puccini and the score just goes back to Joe Kramer, then it's okay. It's not as good. And it's like, well, that's unfair, because you can't have opera music playing at full volume through the rest of the movie. And the Puccini has to be cut and be spliced carefully into the film so it fits, because it's not an opera and you can't stop everything you're doing to just listen to that music. So Joe Kramer is incorporating some of the opera back into the film score, but he has to do it very subtly because, it's a modern movie, and scores don't dominate in modern movies the way they used to. So, it's a balancing act. So it may have been, again, it's what people react to. They don't know. They sometimes don't realize the technique of scoring and using certain things in certain places. They're just only responding to what they hear, and they're like, "Well, this is a sparse texture right here, so they must be not a very good composer." But all those things are, are justified by what's going on in various points of the film, and Alex Ross wasn't in a meeting room when they had the spotting session, so.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I mean, and like you were saying, it's a lot of that dovetailing may have just been the work of a music supervisor or a music editor or somebody, but you still got to give Joe Kramer for the credit for making the decisions to use that music in other places in the film, and just the score in general.
Mm-hmm.
It served the film really nicely in a lot of similar ways, I think, to the way that the Danny Elfman score to the first Mission Impossible movie did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to remember which scene it was. I think it was fairly early on in the film. I mean, you'd be watching a scene and listening to the cue, and the music would change when a shot cut to something else. And just, that sounds like a really silly observation, because, that's oftentimes how film scoring works. But in so many films nowadays, the music isn't written to picture, and there isn't that kind of synchronization. So the music is just going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas in this score, there are lots of places where the music actually fits really well, and it changes where it needs to change. And that too, I think, has really become a luxury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that maybe not all of the compositional work, but a lot of the work that Joe Kramer did on this score he was able to watch the movie while he was doing it, and that seems like it's getting more and more rare.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to move into some other things, but did you have anything else you wanted to say about Mission Impossible?
Nothing much other than, I think this was the first score. It's been a while since I've gone into a movie like really excited about hearing a score, and I don't know that I was thinking that going into this movie, but this was definitely the first movie I've left in a long time where I really noticed the score and really liked it.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened, I think, in a while for me. So that was that to me. That was certainly something, and I certainly look forward to, he wasn't necessarily on my radar before because I hadn't seen, I don't think, any of his previous work, but he certainly is now.
Yeah, I definitely am curious to listen to the next couple projects and see where they go, because I want to hear what he does next. So, yeah. Now, you saw the Mr. Holmes?
I did.
Yeah. So, who scored that?
So, Mr. Holmes was scored by Carter Burwell. We most regularly think of him as the composer for the Coen Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know that I could tell you a lot about the score. So Mr. Holmes, I should just preface, is it's a film starring Ian McKellen as Sherlock Holmes, but it's as if Sherlock Holmes were a real person, and the stories that John Watson wrote were basically fictionalized versions of real cases that happened to real people. So the most of the film is Sherlock Holmes retired to the countryside, keeping bees in his little cottage, and he's like at 93 or something like that. So the score mostly has a pretty straightforward, like, English period piece kind of a sound to it. It's maybe it has a little bit more like synth atmospheric kind of stuff than you might normally imagine. I mean, we've talked about that kind of sound a lot on this show, of like, typical British drama, where you have, the combination of strings and piano, basically. This wasn't really that, but it wasn't too far from that. And the score, it mostly stayed out of the way, which is absolutely the right call, because just watching this movie, you can't not be focusing on Ian McKellen the whole time. He's just crazy, crazy good in this movie. So in this case, I think, knowing that performance is kind of the dominant thing, keeping the music out of the way a little bit was certainly the right call. And for the music that I noticed, it served the film well.
Yeah. And okay, well, that's all we can ask, right?
Yeah. It's a very, very different scoring approach than Joe Kramer's music in Mission Impossible, which, like we said, is a bit more upfront than you might expect, but works really, really well. Carter Burwell scored Mr. Holmes is much more in the background and works just as well there too.
Okay, cool. So we'll, I was kind of on the slow take recently for just seeing stuff and scheduling and whatnot. So I'm gonna try to check out a lot more things for next time. But anyway, some things I have been listening to were some recent purchases, and I wanted to just share like a few things that have come out, and even just within the last week, a classic score by Bruce Broughton, again friend of the show. For a film called Homeward Bound, one of the first dog, cat, and dog buddy movies, or whatever you want to call them. It's a kid's movie, but it features animals as the leads, with human actors voicing the characters. Anyway, so that's available. Speaking of dogs and cats, there was a Stephen King kind of anthology movie called Cat's Eye back in, I want to say, like 84 or 1985, and Alan Silvestri scored that, and that's now available. And Adventures in Babysitting, one of the sort of a staple of the 80s, and it had Elizabeth Shue, I think, who was in Karate Kid and a few other movies. Anyway, that score by Michael Kamen is available. The Aviator, a film starring Christopher Reeve flying, but not in a Superman outfit, scored by Dominic Frontieri, is available. And then a couple favorites of mine I saved for last is Gremlins 2 by Jerry Goldsmith has an expanded version out. Searching for Bobby Fischer by the late James Horner also has an expanded version, as does Outbreak, which comes in a 2 CD format, which is one of the first breakout scores of James Newton Howard from the mid-90s, as well as AI, Artificial Intelligence, by John Williams, has not one, not two, but a 3 CD version that's just come out.
Did you buy that one?
So I picked up a couple of these. Yeah, I've got the Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, I debated whether I wanted to buy that one or not. I've got like just the regular album, and I mean I'll listen to it every once in a while. It's certainly not it's not necessarily one of my favorites of his, so I've debated whether or not I wanted to buy that 3 CD set or not. What are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty good. I want to give it a little more time and listen to some more. I'm focusing on some more sections of it, but I enjoy sort of the alternate takes and some of the, here's like us, one of the, it has like theme from AI, and that wasn't even on the other soundtrack, and it's basically the vocal melody that he introduces later in the film, and there's a orchestral version, and then there's a vocal version, and then there's the different versions of the song that is a whole other set of musical material. Also, it's, I really hated not hated, but I just really wasn't a fan of the layout of the original score, because it's that thing where Williams is like, let's set this up so it's musically cohesive from beginning to end. But that's a score that has a really significant plot and a significant evolution of all the characters musically, and you lose all of that because the first scene he starts with, the first cue they put on the original soundtrack was the one that kind of sounds a lot like John Adams orchestral music.
Yeah.
And it's like once the action starts to really pick up in the movie, then you get that music. And I felt it was really kind of like we hadn't earned it yet as listeners to just jump right to that scene. There's a lot of slow burn music, and some of it has a very Bartok or Bartokian kind of vibe, and it's really haunting and really lovely, and some of that comes in much earlier than I had remembered because of just years of listening to the original score. So I found some of the things like the new cues, the reordering of it, the alternate takes, and the things that weren't included at all in the original soundtrack to be enough of a reason to pick it up. One final shout out I'll give is to a Disney film that, check it out, this would never happen today. So this movie, Return to Oz, came out in the middle 80s, and the music, first of all, it's by a New Yorker, David Shire, and we were talking about him. And
really nice guy.
And yeah, a friend of Kevin, apparently.
Well, I met him once. Yeah. He said some nice things about my music. That's the extent of the friendship.
By extension, then he's friend of the show.
Okay.
So, but he scored it, and it was just interesting to kind of get the CD, listen to the music, and read the liner notes to hear about the entire sort of creative process on it. But the way he came up with the themes it was really creative and really inventive, and not Hollywood, and it was really refreshing. And then it's sad to read how the box office was a very mild to weak reception, because everyone thought, well, it's a Wizard of Oz sequel, so I want musical numbers, and I want blue and white dresses with red ruby slippers, and I want something like the next Judy Garland or some nonsense like that. I don't know that they set the expectation with the film, but it would never be made today, where it recalls a very famous franchise, but goes in
that movie being pretty dark.
Well, it went back to the books as a lot of its inspiration, and I don't know if they tried to capture that. I think they shied away from it in the marketing because they knew that they could bring in a lot more audience people by just saying Wizard of Oz sequel, and kind of not owning what they were actually really doing. But that's not his fault, though. Shire turned in a really interesting, creative, colorful, and fun, and musically a really satisfying score. And anyway, it's been a real refreshing score to listen to and just kind of read about and to experience. So I definitely recommend picking that one up. Let's see. Going forward, though, we've got a little bit of summer left.
A little bit.
Yeah, just just a touch. But yeah, Kevin, did you have any thoughts on that? Anything you're still looking forward to?
I think I really want to check out The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I believe comes out tomorrow. I think it's this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
With Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer.
Right.
Because from the bit I've read about the film and the score, it's basically like this movie was made in large part because of Mad Men and that kind of sleek 60s obsessed thing that Mad Men gave us. I think that's a big reason why this movie got made. And apparently it really plays on that a lot. I think the music will too. So I'm kind of looking forward to that one.
Okay.
The other one that came out recently that I haven't checked out and will probably pass on, even though on paper the score sounds like it should be really interesting, is Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm.
It's got music by Marco Beltrami, but also some music by Philip Glass, and that should be like a big event score kind of thing, you would think. But that movie's gotten such horrible reviews, and I kind of don't have any interest in it whatsoever. So,
yeah,
that Man from U.N.C.L.E., music by Daniel Pemberton. I'm kind of interested in checking that one out.
Okay. Yeah, I almost would think of taking a bullet and going to see Fantastic Four with the sole purpose of listening for the score and to try to come back and say something intelligent about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
let me know how it goes.
Yeah, but I don't really want to. I mean, it's funny because, when we were kids, it was like sticks and stones may break my bones. It's like, no, but words will never hurt me. And it's like, no, they hurt. Because now I have no interest in seeing Fantastic Four because of the sort of negativity surrounding it. And I don't even know.
I kind of didn't to begin with.
Well, Fantastic Four to me is a very lame concept. I just don't.
Yeah.
And I saw The Incredibles, and that was a fun movie, but that as a concept is not very appealing to me. It just happened to be a Pixar movie about superheroes, which is like, well, that's cool. But with all these live-action superhero movies, when one of them comes along and says, well, we're going to be about a family of superheroes, and we're from Marvel, and I'm just like, no, it was sort of cheesy it had to be cheesy in the 60s, and it's really cheesy now. Yeah. But then again, you can poke holes in any comic book character, but I just don't care about,
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I just, yeah. And plus they have, I don't know what the deal is with Doctor Doom, but he's their, he's their Lex Luthor, and it's like, he's such a stupid character. How are they ever going to have that be a real, kind of like a villain you can take seriously? And
well, I mean, the problem is you have to have, because it's obviously the way, and this is the way the first Fantastic Four movie from 10 or 12 years ago worked out too, is that character basically starts as friends or at least colleagues with everybody else, and then after whatever transformation thing becomes the bad guy. But that means at some point in the movie you have to have your lead characters say the name Victor Von Doom with a straight face.
Yeah,
and you can't, because
that's what I mean.
So over the top.
It's pretty terrible. Or then you have to work it backwards and create a really contrived origin story. Look, they were best friends. But and of course, none of this has anything to do with the music. But I am slightly curious what Glass would have come up with. But some of the reports I read, which I'm going to tie this into the music, said that it got so bad on set with the director that he kept wanting it to be not happy, not like chipper, just dark, grim, and really kind of slow and kind of plodding. And he almost was telling the actors like when they had to blink and breathe. And I mean, I read that. I'm sure it sounds pretty absurd, but I think there was some day-to-day issues with it. But we may never know. But as they say, the truth may be somewhere in between, in the middle. but I don't really care because I'm just glad. I'm excited as far as the comic book movies go. I'm excited for the Captain America Civil War, and to hear what probably Henry Jackman will do for that, and then I am curious what Hans
I'm
Zimmer.
not sure who's doing the score, but just based on the trailer alone, I think Deadpool looks really good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
I don't know if you've seen that trailer. Let's see.
I've seen the trailer. I've seen the two different versions of them, and I can't remember. I don't think it listed music.
Okay. Yeah,
But anyway.
I would have to look it up. I'm not
Yeah.
sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, it looks fun, and I am curious to see what the Batman Superman movie will be. Although I could just sense it's just going to be loud and over the top, and lots of choir.
Yeah, and I think we got a little
percussion.
taste of that score in the Comic-Con trailer, which is
Yeah,
something absurd, like 3.5 minutes, that's a really long trailer. But
yeah.
I think there was some original score in that.
I was wondering about that too because Lord knows they made the movie like a whole year in advance. Because when they announced it, they went to work on it so they could get the composers in there and actually start doing some ideas and putting some things down. And yeah, so it's basically like instead of Hans Zimmer, crash landing in the middle of an opera and kind of turning it into a Hans Zimmer orchestra, it's kind of like Hans Zimmer crashing into a performance of Carmina Burana and saying, well, let's just do this, but we'll do it with my sounds. And that's kind of what the trailer sounded like to me. Just lots of, by the end of it, it's like this sort of phony requiem, kind of the way everyone thinks of generically like a requiem, lots of minor chords, very loud with all singers. But anyway, but we'll see. I mean, that's the sound it's going to have to tap into. But
Right.
okay. Yeah, all right.
Is there anything else you're looking forward to for the last little bit of summer we've got here?
No, not really. I mean, nothing too big is coming out that had really caught my attention. Man from U.N.C.L.E. looks fun, and I wouldn't mind checking that out. And other than that, no, it's been kind of like all summers. It's been kind of had its ups and downs, and I'm just probably going to move on to the next batch of like holiday films and have my interest there. So
There you go.
yeah, okay. Well, that will do it for this episode of Streamers and Punches. You can listen to us on soundnotion.tv/SAP, where you can subscribe to our show, leave comments, and find links to the music we spoke about. You can also subscribe to the show through iTunes. My name is Bill Witham, and you are Kevin Wilt. And thank you for listening.
Kevin, is everything all right over there?
Yeah.